On June 20th, 1944, aboard the USS Enterprise in the Philippine Sea, Lieutenant Junior Grade Saburo Kitamura of the Imperial Japanese Navy stood inside the mess hall, his hands trembling as he balanced a tray. It was piled with more food than his entire squadron had eaten in 3 days: fried chicken, mashed potatoes rich with butter, green beans, white bread, apple pie, and a glass of cold milk. The American sailor serving food looked impatient as Kitamura hesitated. He pointed toward another counter and asked, "You want chocolate or vanilla?" The words made no sense. Ice cream was unthinkable on a warship. It needed refrigeration, something no combat vessel in the Japanese fleet could afford. Yet here, aboard one of the most battle-tested American carriers, prisoners of war were being asked which flavor they preferred. Only 4 hours earlier, Kitamura had been rescued from the Philippine Sea. He was one of 43 airmen pulled from the wreckage after the aerial battle, later known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. He had expected execution, or at best, starvation and humiliation. Japanese propaganda had been clear. Americans were monsters who tortured and devoured prisoners. But instead, the Americans had bandaged his wounds, given him morphine, and were now offering him ice cream. The question, chocolate or vanilla, echoed in his memory for decades. It was the instant when his belief in Japan's wartime narrative began to collapse. For thousands of Japanese soldiers who experienced capture by the United States Navy, this same revelation unfolded again and again. Roughly 35,000 of them came face to face with an enemy whose abundance and humanity contradicted everything they had been taught to believe. They saw ships where ordinary sailors ate better than Japanese admirals. They saw machines that could turn seawater into fresh water endlessly. They saw ice cream machines working day and night, even as the ship fought in battle. These moments shattered the illusion of divine superiority and military discipline that had defined Japan's war effort. The difference could be measured not only in weapons or numbers, but in calories and technology. While Japanese crews lived on rice balls and pickled vegetables, American sailors consumed about 400 calories a day of fresh, varied food. While Japanese ships pumped aviation fuel by hand, American vessels did it automatically. While the Imperial Navy prayed for favorable winds, the U.S. Navy created its own comfort through air conditioning, refrigeration, and machines that made ice at sea. This realization began the moment captured airmen were lifted aboard American ships. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, the man who had led the attack on Pearl Harbor, described his own experience after being rescued in 1945 from the wreck of a Japanese transport. "Taken aboard the USS Missouri," he recalled. "They hauled me up like a fish, and I prepared for death. Instead, a doctor checked my injuries while a sailor handed me coffee. Real coffee, hot with sugar and cream. I had not tasted it since 1940. The sailor apologized that there were no donuts left. To a man whose countrymen were boiling bark to survive, the idea of running out of donuts, not food itself, revealed a chasm deeper than any battlefield defeat. For these prisoners, America's power was not just in weapons, but in its ability to feed, heal, and offer kindness even in war. The first American meal they received did more than fill their stomachs. It forced them to question everything they thought they knew about civilization, strength, and mercy. The Imperial Japanese Navy's own records, captured after the war, revealed that by 1944, enlisted sailors received only about 1,400 calories each day when supplies could be secured. Protein came mainly from fish, but only when the boats had enough fuel to go fishing. Vitamin shortages were everywhere. Because of this, diseases like beriberi, scurvy, and night blindness spread across crews, weakening men even before they entered battle. American naval rations were the opposite in nearly every way. They included fresh meat daily, frozen vegetables, newly baked bread, dairy products, eggs for breakfast, and several types of drinks. The Office of Naval Records reported that large aircraft carriers in 1944 served nearly 15,000 meals every single day. Their menus rotated through dozens of choices. Tuesday might bring roast beef, Thursday fried chicken, and Sunday ham with pineapple. Japanese prisoners who had grown used to eating nothing but rice and pickles could not understand how such variety existed at sea. The surprise grew even greater when Japanese prisoners were shown the enlisted men's living quarters. Petty Officer Kazuo Sakamaki, who was captured after his submarine was disabled during the Pearl Harbor attack and became the first Japanese prisoner of war held by the United States, later described his shock at what he saw inside American submarines. He wrote, "Their submarines had showers with hot water. The crews slept in bunks with real mattresses and clean sheets. There was even a library filled with books and magazines. In their mess hall stood a coffee urn that never ran out. They lived better underwater than we did on land." The discovery that American warships had ice cream machines left an especially deep psychological impact. The Japanese Navy had long believed ice cream at sea was impossible because it required refrigeration and storage power no combat vessel could afford. But by 1943, the U.S. Navy had built floating ice cream factories. The USS Lexington alone could produce up to 500 gallons of ice cream a day. Concrete barges had even been turned into ice cream production ships, each capable of making 5,000 gallons per shift. When the USS Lexington CV-16 was torpedoed and began to list, sailors moving to other vessels were reported to have carried tubs of ice cream with them before abandoning ship. Japanese prisoners looked on as American sailors, weary from fighting fires and flooding, were rewarded with ice cream sundaes as part of their battle rations. The experience was disorienting. Their nation was struggling to feed its troops, but the enemy, whom they had been told was weak and spoiled, was giving its sailors ice cream in the middle of combat. Chief Petty Officer Yoshio Yamada, captured when his destroyer sank at the Battle of Leyte Gulf, spent 3 days aboard the USS Iowa before being transferred to a land-based prison camp. Decades later, his hidden diary was discovered, and inside, he had written, "The battleship's crew eats in shifts, but the food never stops. They have machines that peel potatoes, slice bread, and make ice. The kitchen never closes. They throw away more food after one meal than my entire ship received for a week." When he asked an American guard why so much food was wasted, the guard laughed and replied, "It's not waste if you have unlimited supplies." The laundry facilities left Japanese prisoners speechless. They had been used to washing clothes in seawater, scrubbing their uniforms by hand until the fabric thinned and tore. But aboard American carriers, they saw industrial washing machines, dryers, and presses working around the clock. Enlisted sailors received clean uniforms twice each week. Fresh water, which was precious beyond imagination on Japanese ships, where men often went weeks without bathing, flowed freely for showers, laundry, and cleaning. The evaporators on the USS Enterprise alone could produce 140,000 gallons of fresh water every day, which was more than the entire Japanese carrier force could generate combined. The recreation spaces on American carriers seemed like something from a fantasy world. There were movie theaters showing Hollywood films, libraries stocked with thousands of books, and gymnasiums equipped with basketball courts. Some ships even had hobby shops where sailors carved wood or built model ships to pass the time. The USS Enterprise had its own newspaper, published daily at sea, which included sports results, comic strips, and letters from home. Japanese carriers, by comparison, offered meditation rooms and small shrine spaces for prayer. American ships offered soda fountains that served milkshakes. Lieutenant Commander Takeshi Maeda, whose Zero fighter was shot down over Iwo Jima, spent 2 weeks aboard the USS Bunker Hill after being rescued. During his interrogation, he admitted, "Your enlisted sailors live better than our officers. They have radios in their quarters, pictures of their girlfriends, and packages from home filled with chocolate and cigarettes. They complain about meals that would be considered banquets for Japanese admirals. I even saw one sailor throw away a candy bar because it had melted. That single bar held more sugar than Japanese pilots would see in months." Medical care revealed an even deeper divide between the two nations. In the Imperial Navy, doctors were trained to return the wounded to service as quickly as possible, regardless of their condition. On American ships, the sick bays treated everyone, including enemies, with equal attention and modern medical technology. Their operating rooms had X-ray machines, blood banks, and surgical tools equal to those in major hospitals on land. Because antibiotics like penicillin were available in abundance, infections that once meant death healed in days. Pharmacist's mate. Second Class Robert Wagner, who served aboard the USS Intrepid, later remembered treating Japanese prisoners. He said, "They couldn't believe we would waste medicine on our enemies." One pilot had a severe leg infection and kept refusing treatment, saying, "Save it for Americans." I had to open the medical stores and show him the cabinets filled with sulfa, penicillin, and morphine before he finally accepted care. He started to cry. The repair facilities demonstrated the full scale of American industrial power at sea. Japanese ships had to return to homeland ports for almost any serious repair. But American warships could fix themselves while still in combat zones. The Navy's network of floating dry docks, repair ships, and carrier workshops acted like mobile factories. They could rebuild engines, replace armor, or fabricate completely new parts on demand. The USS Enterprise's machine shop could manufacture nearly any part smaller than an aircraft engine. Its welding team worked without pause, while electricians repaired circuits and systems even as the ship continued to fight. When kamikaze attacks grew fiercer in 1945, some Japanese pilots who survived their failed missions witnessed American damage control firsthand. Ensign Ryuji Nagatsuka, whose Zero fighter crashed near the USS Randolph, was rescued from the water and taken aboard. He watched in disbelief as the carrier's crew repaired kamikaze damage while still launching aircraft. They used foam that extinguished fires within seconds, pumps that cleared water faster than it could enter, and metal plates that sealed torn hulls before his eyes. The teams moved like a single machine. There was no shouting, no panic, only calm precision. They restored the ship's fighting condition within hours. While similar damage would have sunk a Japanese carrier, the food production systems aboard American ships were equally astonishing. Each carrier had its own bakery, turning out about 1,500 loaves of bread every day. Butcher shops processed entire sides of beef stored in freezers larger than Japanese submarines. Ice machines produced several tons of ice daily, keeping food and drinks cold in the Pacific heat. The galley on the USS Enterprise used more electricity than many Japanese destroyers. Steam kettles could cook 300 gallons of soup at once. Electric mixers, automatic dishwashers, and potato peelers handled jobs that would have required teams of sailors on a Japanese ship. The supply network completed the picture of American abundance. Japanese fleets waited months for supplies and still received only a portion of what they needed. The U.S. Navy's fast carrier groups, in contrast, were resupplied weekly while still at sea. Fleet oilers pumped millions of gallons of fuel through hoses that stretched across the waves. Ammunition ships delivered entire loads of bombs and shells. Stores ships brought fresh food, mail, replacement sailors, and even small comforts from home. Lieutenant Minoru Tanaka, held in the brig of the USS Hornet, watched this process unfold. 3 ships came alongside at once, he wrote later. Fuel lines to one side, ammunition lines to the other, and helicopters bringing mail above. They transferred more supplies in 3 hours than our carriers received in 3 months. I saw lettuce, tomatoes, and fruit. Real fruit. We fought for the Emperor on empty stomachs, but Americans ate salads at sea. The mail system also amazed Japanese prisoners. A Japanese sailor might receive a single letter in an entire year if lucky. But American crews received mail almost every week, even during combat operations. The Navy's V-mail system reproduced handwritten letters as small photographic prints to save space. Thousands of these messages arrived daily, along with care packages filled with cookies, books, records, and photographs. For American sailors, each envelope was a reminder that they were still connected to home, even thousands of miles away. Christmas of 1944 left the deepest impression on the Japanese prisoners who spent that holiday aboard American ships. They witnessed celebrations unlike anything they had seen, even in peacetime Japan. The USS Enterprise's menu for December 25, 1944, recorded an astonishing list of dishes: roast turkey with stuffing, ham glazed with pineapple, mashed and sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, 3 kinds of vegetables, freshly baked rolls, 3 kinds of pie, ice cream, candy, nuts, and hot coffee. To men who had been surviving on rice and pickled radish, this meal seemed almost unreal. Seaman First Class Hiroshi Nakamura, held prisoner aboard the USS Saratoga, recorded his thoughts secretly in a diary. He wrote, "The Americans celebrated Christmas while we had been ordered to destroy them. Every sailor received gifts from home organizations, cigarettes, candy, books, and razors. The mess hall was decorated with paper and lights. They sang songs and played music. They were cheerful. We were starving and dying for the Emperor, while our enemies celebrated in comfort. That was the moment I realized Japan had already lost." The revelation went far beyond food. It touched the core of Japan's wartime belief system, the Yamato spirit, which taught that moral strength could overcome material shortages, collapsed when confronted with American industry and organization. Ensign Takeo Yamamoto, captured at Okinawa, later wrote, "We had been told that Americans were soft, that wealth made them weak. But I saw them fight fires for 12 hours straight, eat ice cream, and go back to duty without complaint. Their abundance did not make them fragile. It gave them power. We were the ones who were weak." Clinging to the illusion that faith alone could replace nourishment, by the time the war ended, Japanese prisoners had witnessed things that once seemed impossible. They saw ships turning seawater into drinking water, ice cream being served in tropical heat, and movie theaters operating in the middle of the ocean. They saw libraries stocked with books near combat zones, hospitals functioning aboard carriers, and machine shops rebuilding parts while the ship was still under fire. They tasted foods many Japanese people had never seen: hamburgers, hot dogs, milkshakes, apple pie, and chocolate cake. They encountered a society where democracy expressed itself in small but profound ways: enlisted men eating the same meals as officers, sailors of different races serving together, and even prisoners receiving medical care. When the prisoners finally returned home after Japan's surrender, their stories began to circulate. Without realizing it, they became messengers of American abundance. Their testimonies carried more influence than any occupation broadcast or leaflet. They spoke of ships where sailors complained about meals that Japanese families would have considered feasts, where ice cream was as common as rice, and where ordinary servicemen lived more comfortably than Japan's elite. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, the man who led the attack on Pearl Harbor, also experienced that same shock of generosity. After the war, he converted to Christianity and became a missionary. His transformation began with a simple moment aboard the USS Missouri. He later recalled, "The Americans had every reason to hate me, to let me die. But instead, they treated my wounds, gave me food, and showed me respect. Their generosity revealed a strength greater than any weapon." Statistical summary from U.S. Naval Records. Daily caloric intake. U.S. Navy, 4 to 100 calories. Imperial Japanese Navy, 1, 400 calories. Freshwater production. Large U.S. carriers, 140,000 gallons daily. Ice cream production. USS Lexington, 500 gallons daily. Bread production. USS Enterprise, 500 loaves daily. Mail delivery weekly, even in combat zones. Movie screenings, 2 to 3 different films weekly. Laundry, clean uniforms provided twice weekly. Medical supplies, full surgical capacity at sea. The Japanese prisoners who had witnessed the abundance aboard American carriers returned home to a nation in ruins, carrying a message that would challenge everything their country once believed. They realized that their enemy's strength did not come from cruelty, but from compassion. It did not come from sacrifice, but from abundance. It did not come from blind faith, but from organization and supply. Their accounts helped prepare Japan for the years of occupation and rebuilding that followed, because they had seen the future with their own eyes. And for many, that future tasted like chocolate ice cream served at sea during battle. The transformation of Japan's military prisoners through exposure to American naval power stands as one of the most striking ideological reversals in modern history. Men who had once pledged to die for the emperor survived to speak about American ships that made ice cream in the middle of war. Pilots who had flown suicide missions lived to see the ease with which democracy could produce comfort and resilience at the same time. Sailors who believed that purity of spirit could overcome material limits discovered that true endurance depended on material abundance. In the end, the ice cream machines aboard American carriers achieved what no bomb could. They destroyed the myth that the Japanese Empire's spiritual strength could overcome industrial might. Those soft-serve machines, still running while ships burned, became symbols of a deeper power. The freshly baked bread served during combat, the medical care offered to wounded enemies, and the calm efficiency of American sailors all revealed a truth more devastating to Japan's militarist ideals than any weapon. The prisoners returned not as broken men, but as witnesses to a vision of strength built on generosity. They carried home a truth that would guide their nation's transformation from an empire driven by conquest to a democracy founded on cooperation. This story endures as a reminder that the greatest victories are sometimes achieved not through destruction, but through demonstration. True strength is revealed not by what a nation can destroy, but by what it can create. During the war, the Japanese could not believe that American carriers held machines capable of making ice cream. Yet what they learned was far greater than that. They discovered that democracy's most powerful weapon was its capacity to create plenty in the midst of war, to share abundance even with its enemies, and to hold on to humanity even in the chaos of battle.